Hey guys, Isabel here. Welcome back to Reeled In. So the new Spider-Man No Way Home movie has been out for about a week or two, so hopefully everyone's gotten a chance to see it. And as we talk about it, there will be spoilers just in case you have not seen it. Do recommend seeing it. If I had to tell you guys to spend your money on something during a pandemic, it would be this movie. But this will be our first Dyad discusses for the new year. So happy New Year, everyone. It's like January 3rd. Can't believe it's already January. But today we're going to give our thoughts on the new Spider-Man movie. And in our opinions, it is probably the best Spider-Man movie, I think, ever made. Definitely in the MCU. Arguably, I think better than Tobey's and Andrew's as Spider.
What the fuck?
You actually do kind of sound like him a little bit.
Well, of course, we look alike too.
And here I have with me my friend Connor, the Spider-Man from another universe.
Okay, Peter K. Parker.
Okay, first things first, did you like it?
I absolutely did. I think, like a lot of people, I actually do think this is the best Spider-Man that we've seen so far. I know some people have like different opinions about it, but overall, like it served its purpose. So, like I told you in private, that this movie is more of a love letter to the cinematic spiderweb and
Yes.
fans of the cinematic spiderweb, and I think that it did a very good job at not only closing off the trilogy for Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but it kind of did a whole lot for the predecessors for Amazing Spider-Man and then Sam Raimi's Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm. Has your opinion changed at all since when you first really saw it, like right after the theaters, and like now it's been, like I said, like a week or two since it came out?
I mean, there have been some things that I've like culminated on and I've heard other people talk about. But you know, we'll get into that. But there are some things that I have not been swayed on. So overall, I still think it's an amazing Spider-Man, and I definitely don't regret going out to see it 3 times. So to kind of reiterate what you said, it's definitely worth the time and the money, and you know, obviously do what you feel safe with the whole pandemic still going on.
I will say, I do still think it's like one of the better Spider-Man movies ever made, but honestly, as I've like sat, and had some time away from it, I'm a little bit less like obsessed about it in a way. Because like you said, there are some things that's kind of, I still think it's a really good movie, but I'm less like, oh my god, No Way Home, like I'm just kind of like, it was a good movie. There are things I loved about it, and there are things I don't like about it. Just like ideals that are in the movie, I don't always usually agree with, which is fair. I don't have to agree with them, and if other people do, that's cool. But what I do like the most about this movie, like you said, is that it is a very good completion for the 3 MCU Spider-Man movies. Because, the MCU is full of all these superheroes, and they all have their own movies, their own TV shows, and a lot of times characters and their storylines, they can kind of be all over the place a little bit, and like the story that they're trying to tell. But I think with this Spider-Man's trilogy now, I think the plot and the overall story of this Peter Parker is like almost perfect in a way. Especially, I actually have it written down of like what he's gone through like in the 3 movies. So obviously Spider-Man Homecoming, the very first one, the very first solo like Spider-Man movie, Peter Parker is like an eager young boy and he wants to be like an Avenger, and that's like the whole setup. And then Far From Home, Peter Parker has to deal with handling the responsibility of like actually being a hero and like what that all entails. And then what I did like about this movie the most, and that what like the final message was for this No Way Home, is that Peter has now grown to like a man, and he realizes like the true cost and the price to pay for doing the right thing, like for the greater good. So like things like sacrifice, which I think is the new theme in like all of the MCU, because for the first part of Phase 4, it was like understanding. So with like WandaVision, Falcon, and even like Loki, it was like understanding yourself, understanding like others and what they go through. But I think that with like Hawkeye and No Way Home, I think the new like motif, I guess, is like learning what sacrifice is and like what that means, like if you want to be a true hero.
These and to kind of touch on Hawkeye a little bit, obviously there might be spoilers for that down the road, just be aware. But especially with younger characters. So characters that are our age and a little bit younger, like that whole like end of high school and early college and even beyond that is still like a really pivotal point in a lot of people's lives and like figuring themselves out. So when you have someone like Peter Parker who has a gargantuan amount of responsibility because of his power, I think that this trilogy does a really good job at like showing that in a way that is understandable to that kind of same or similar demographic. So like even just like beyond the hero part of it, the high school experience, a lot of Hollywood movies do not get it right. But this trilogy has definitely, I think, done a really good job, and I tip my hat off to John Watts, who like obviously understands the kinds of experiences and the kinds of things that those characters will feel, and it's relatable.
I think probably the actors also, because I think I did see something where like Tom Holland actually there was a like an ending or a line that he like didn't think was what like Peter Parker would say, and so they actually kind of changed the ending a little bit. So I think the actors also did a very good job with delivering their lines and making it believable. Obviously it's like what an actor and actress are. Oh, yeah. That's their job.
We don't talk about their performance enough, I think, especially in this Spider-Man trilogy. We don't give Tom Holland and Zendaya and Jacob Batalon a lot of, or we don't give them enough credit, I don't think.
He definitely they all acted like their butts off.
Yeah, like I definitely think that Tom actually deserves awards for this performance.
Mm-hmm. Even just like the difference with like MJ, like obviously like her and Peter, they know each other, love each other, like, and then it's like when everyone forgets about Peter and like just like the deadpan's like, hi, how are you? I'm like, that's so good. Like you can definitely tell like the difference between like how she like views him and acts towards him. So we've also talked about this like after the movie, 'cause we went out to dinner. What did you think of like the first 5 minutes of the opening? Because I actually did not like the first 5 minutes.
I didn't mind it as much as you did for probably completely different reasons. I actually thought that the way that it transitioned into the opening was one of the more interesting opening scenes for a Marvel film. I kind of liked how it transitioned from the Marvel logo and you hear it kind of backtracking from Far From Home. Because a lot of movies, sometimes they'll pick up right where it left off in the last one. Some movies do it really well, some movies really don't. But I think this one actually did.
Yeah, my issue wasn't really with like where it picked off from. Like I think it made sense that like, dealing with the aftermath. I just think like, I said this before, like obviously like what Mysterio said in Far From Home, like everyone believes like media and everything nowadays, but literally the fact that every single person like in the vicinity immediately like tried to like grab and like like Peter Parker, like Spider-Man, and just tried, and it's like right against him, just like if there's just like one person who's like, come on guys, like let's hear him out, like I would have found that a bit more believable than every single one just like
Also, I think a lot of that too is not necessarily everybody in the vicinity was teaming up against him. It was more of that kind of when you just have like a celebrity appearance and you have like a meltdown. Like a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it'd be cool. But then they're like, Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and then everybody's just like freaking out. So I feel like a lot of it was the freak out, but some other people were like, do I like him? Do I not like him? Am I a sheep? Am I just going to follow what I hear on the news? Because there are sure plenty of people. So I actually don't find that part completely unrealistic. But I think it's a mixture of people freaking out because now they know who Spider-Man is.
Yeah. Well, they definitely did show like the more negative aspects. So people are trying to pull this thing off, and like actually like when he was swinging away, someone like lunged for him to like stop him.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. I just thought that was one thing I was kind of like, maybe like one person who's like, give him a chance. Like besides like MJ,
Unfortunately, though, those are the people who tend to speak the loudest.
That's true.
So I don't think you were
of the world.
Yeah, so I don't think you like, and when other people notice this, I don't think they're necessarily taking into account that this isn't the majority necessarily. It's just the people who are screaming the loudest. Because they're for sure are gonna be people who are like, this is total bull, and it's not believable.
I also did not like Happy's characterization. I know he's not like the focus of this movie, but I think like they made him a little bit dumb, like dumber than I think he has been portrayed in the past.
For sure. And like, I think there was reasons for that. I think the fact that he had this whole thing going on about May, and that can really mess you up in here. You know, like, you can't think straight because you're constantly thinking about this other person. And they broke up, and he's obviously way more upset about it than she is. Did they even actually break up? Were they actually
together? Yeah.
Or did he just say that and it was like some unsaid thing? Because that was the other vibe that I kind of got from that. I'm like, Happy, come on.
I'm sure they were like push and pull kind of thing, like yes and no, and then like it wasn't. I don't think it was like ever really official. They maybe at the most just spent like time together.
Yeah, Happy's characterization was definitely more like throwaway laugh kind of character, which is a little disappointing just because of, you know, he deserves a little bit more respect because he's been here since 2008.
Yeah, he was in the very first like Iron Man movie, the one that got the MCU started. So
yeah, like I get it. In Homecoming, especially with Tony Stark and everything, like he's the butt of the joke.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where it's kind of appropriate. So I actually, in Far From Home, I kind of liked him stepping into the role of, I need to kind of be a helping hand to Peter.
Right.
So in this fact, the only real thing that he kind of lends is his apartment. You know, it's just a little much.
Yeah, I was
it's a little much and not quite enough.
Okay, so moving forward in the movie, one thing I liked a lot is, I think you kind of touched on this earlier, is how they depicted like Peter going to school, and also like how it can actually sometimes be kind of cringe to like be a celebrity with like a big one with everyone, you know, always like wanting to take your picture and like always wanting to know like what you're doing. Like when I was sitting in the theater and I was watching it, I like felt the cringe. I was like, this is so awkward. Like this sucks for him. I feel so bad for him.
You get like secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah. So I also want to talk a little bit about Doctor Strange. First of all, him not being the Sorcerer Supreme actually surprised me.
I didn't like that.
You didn't like that?
I didn't like that. And I don't know if Wong in the comics ever became Sorcerer Supreme for whatever reason. I think it was kind of a cheap move to have him give up the title of Sorcerer Supreme because of the blip.
I don't think it was like given up. Like I don't think he actually ever was Sorcerer Supreme, because I think we all as like a collective fandom have been calling him that, but I don't think in the movies he's actually ever referred to. I could be wrong because it's been a while since I've seen the Doctor Strange movie, but I don't think he's actually ever referred to.
Tilda Swinton literally gave him the title of Sorcerer Supreme!
Who did?
Tilda Swinton.
In the Doctor Strange movie?
Yes.
When?
I don't know.
Okay. Because also, but you said you don't like it. I was shocked and surprised, but after I got over that, I kind of do like it because I feel like, you know, Doctor Strange is one of those very like arrogant and confident characters. I feel like that's something that can like, you know, knock him down a peg, which I'm always here for, and then being rebuilt back up for the better. I'm always here for those kind of character arcs. But so I like that. I did like that. I also liked how briefly Doctor Strange sort of unintentionally took on a little bit of like a mentor role, but also not in the way you would expect. For like 2.5 minutes. I know. But it was like a kick that Peter needed to kind of like be his own person. Because I feel like Tony Stark, like, of course, was like the mentor for Peter Parker. But I feel like Tony Stark kind of, I wouldn't say smothered is like a good word, but definitely kind of like
he spoiled him.
Yeah, and like limited, like.
He was very controlling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think like what Doctor Strange did was kind of allow Peter to like you don't think he would, because obviously he's trying to stop Peter from like initially trying to do what his plan is, but I think a part of him like did allow Peter to kind of like prove himself in a way and like let Peter do his own thing, because I don't know about you guys, but I personally don't think Peter Parker could beat Doctor Strange like in actuality. So
I think part of that too, and he even says he forgets how he's still a kid. So I think he gave him a lot more credit, and where it arguably is due, I think, Like, for someone of his age, he's incredibly intelligent, literally. If he can outsmart Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension by using geometry. Excuse me? Like, I technically shouldn't have even passed geometry when I was in high school. So
Yeah, I don't know how I passed geometry either, to be honest.
to my point, I think he gives him a lot of credit, and he looks at him with a lot of maturity and a lot of intelligence, unlike some of the other Avengers, because obviously he's been around other Avengers and he's just like, oh my god. So like the Guardians, even though they were so poorly written, in my opinion, in Infinity War, like that definitely would give the connotation for any other character who has a level head, including Nebula, to be like, these guys are idiots. And then you have someone that is like 16, is very well respected and trusted by Tony Stark. I think it just it puts a different price tag on Peter Parker.
I did like that about this movie, is that obviously we do know Peter Parker is a smart kid. Like in like not only the MCU, but like in other Spider-Man movies, we know this. Like in Homecoming, we see him make his own like web shooters, but they're very limited scenes, and I think sometimes the audience actually kind of forgets just how smart Peter Parker is. And so I liked how this movie like really showed him obviously like using geometry to like get out of the mirror dimension and defeat who arguably should probably be like the Sorcerer Supreme by now. And then like we see him, and also I like that they showed it because this whole movie is Peter Parker kind of going away from like Stark technology and like this big fancy like technological like gadgets and becoming like, you know, comic book accurate. So when the three Peters, they're in like their high school like chem lab, you know, they're making their own stuff. They're doing it like on their own by themselves without like help, which I really liked a lot.
They're doing it with themselves, by themselves.
Yeah, all together by themselves with all of themselves.
But even when this Peter Parker figures out how to cure Dr. Octavius, so even in the scene where he's working it out and he was able to figure out how to cure Dr. Octavius, it's kind of a testament to how smart he really is, even though he has all the Stark tech. And I know that some people's like biggest issues is that he still has all this Stark tech. But I think between Far From Home and No Way Home, I think the fact that he's still using it he's using it like by himself, he's using his own thought process to kind of make these new suits and try to cure these villains that are coming in from a different universe. Like you said, a testament to how smart he actually is. And I really like how this movie showed that. They didn't kind of just play it for laughs, because a lot of times they'll just play it for laughs and that's why you forget. Yeah,
or it's in like a montage scene and it's like you know, like half a second, you know.
Yeah, so like when he built his own suit in Far From Home, I was just so excited, because that's also my favorite suit.
It is? Okay.
Yes.
I think I'd like to see more of because now he's at the end of the movie.
I hate the Iron Spider suit.
I know you do. Because now at the end of this movie, he now has the comic book accurate suit with the blue, the shiny blue, and like the red, and then the Spider-Man logo. So like now he's back to being, well, not back, but he's like the embodiment, I think, of like the comic book Spider-Man.
He's starting from square one.
But... yeah, because he has his own apartment, which, you know, he does in the comics.
Yeah.
He gets his own apartment. He probably has to get his own job now, whether that be for the Bugle or...
it's pizza time.
Something else.
Probably pizza delivery guy part-time.
Probably.
With the Bugle, though, I thought it was really interesting that in this trilogy, we don't see him too enamored by photos, but I think there's opportunity. So the one who is so enamored by taking photos is MJ. And I know that John wants to let Zendaya like use a lot of her own pictures too, because apparently I guess that's something that she's interested in. So the fact that MJ was so fascinated by taking photos, I'm wondering if maybe that won't segue into this quote unquote new version of Peter Parker kind of taking that on as like homage to his MJ.
Aww. Okay, quickly kind of backtracking. So you were talking about the 5 of the Sinister Six. villains of the Spider-Man movie. You and I have had this discussion. I think we differ a little bit on it. And it comes to like the ideal of like, I personally agree with Doctor Strange in you kind of have to send them back as they are. I know you don't agree. Because, and like, I'll let you do your opinion first, but because like, I think it messes up the timeline for the other Tobys, or the other Peters.
Well, yes, but no. So they kind of don't touch on that. So I don't think that the MCU actually believes in the butterfly effect. So I don't know if that argument is entirely valid. I know you have different opinions on the way that it was thought about and the whole like fixing, because I know in certain contexts, fixing someone is really not a good not a good mentality to have, and I understand where that comes from. Yeah. But I think in this context it's very different. One point that I wanted to make, I don't know if this was intentional or if it just happened to be that way, but the villains from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans, from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, actually seemed to be grateful to being helped by this version Peter, because not only was he able to actually go through with it and do it, but I think that these characters especially didn't want to be like that. They obviously had very different plans, and while all the villains in one way or another kind of get lost, you know, in whatever they're trying to do, whether it's a quest for power or just knowledge or to be a better version of themselves, even if that means becoming a lizard, you can tell that like Sandman and Doc Ock and the Goblin, they're trapped, and you can tell that their characters want to escape from this thing that unfortunately has kind of taken over their lives. And you see that when Doc Ock is cured, and I just think it's a really interesting dynamic as opposed to the Amazing Spider-Man villains who you know did get lost along the way, but they didn't really want to change. Like there wasn't something inside of them, you know, banging on the window of their soul going like, let me out. Like they wanted to be that way. Dr. Connors wanted to make everybody a lizard, which is just so weird to me. But you also see like when he gets cured, like he's in tears. Mm-hmm. He's upset about it. I actually think
they may have reused footage from The Amazing Spider-Man, because I think he actually is healed or fixed or whatever in The Amazing Spider-Man. I haven't seen those movies in a very long time, so I could be remembering incorrectly. But he actually is crying, and you see like the lizard skin like dripping off of him essentially, or peeling off of him.
Well, they definitely reused stuff. I forget the actor's name, but the guy who played Sandman, I guess they couldn't get on there for reshoots, so they just used the same footage and reversed it from... And some people notice it, some people don't. I notice it, but I don't necessarily... It didn't ruin the movie. Mm-hmm. You know, some people say, like, reusing footage is really not a good idea. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think because it's so brief.
I will say, though, like, you know, obviously, like, the movie is as it is and that they were fixed. But I think the fact that the other Peters from the universe that, like, their villains were in were kind of the ones, like, to fix them... I did like that, because I think if it was just like the MCU's Peter Parker just like fixing all these villains and sending them back, I think that would actually, in my mind, be like worse. And like, it's not bad, but just like, it wouldn't be as good of like a story, and I think would actually lead to more problems. And the reason why I don't really like it is because in my mind, we know, like, we've actually been told like what points in like Andrew's Peter and Toby's Peter these villains been taken away from, and it's literally like right as they're about to die or like they're about to get cured or whatever happens in those movies. But also the reason, like, everything kind of does happen for a reason, and like you personally, like, you go through things and like you become whoever you're going to become. And so if you like fix these villains, Peter 1 or Peter 2 and Peter 3, like, what are they going to be now?
Well, that's the really confusing part, because, like I said, they don't believe in the butterfly effect, it seems. So I think it just creates another timeline.
Oh my god. There's already
so
many.
Kind of, it contributes to the whole multiverse mess. Mm-hmm. But I think it just creates, like, another universe.
Mm.
It's really strange, too, because the Peter 1 or Peter 2 and Peter 3, they're grown up, which is another thing that I'm glad they didn't try to just pretend like they were kids, because
Toby's Peter's still
Tobey
16.
Maguire, I mean, he looks great for his age.
Yeah.
He really got back in shape for this role, but he does not. He's not like Tom Holland. He's not ageless.
Yeah, he didn't even look like a child in his own Spider-Man movie. But whatever. Unless though, like a way I could see it working is that like, so the events happen, as they do in like the Sam Raimi movies and the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and so when Spider-Man, oh my god, Peter 2 and Peter 3, wow, this is confusing. So like if they retain their memories like now as the events are happening now, so that way like when they go back, they already know like what they have been through. And they remember like being able to fix these villains. So like their whole like timeline might change because obviously like the events that would have happened did not happen because these villains have been fixed. But if they remember that, like they would still have the same like characterization, I feel like, if that makes any sense.
I'm very confused.
Okay,
but so is everybody else. So it's okay. And we just kind of accept it and move on.
Yeah. I don't know. I also do think it is a little bit of like a one solution fits all, which isn't like in the real world. That's not, really, that it's not really a thing. But obviously Multiverse of Madness is a consequence of this whole thing, which I like because this is all like phase 4 of the MCU is basically a consequence of like what happened in Endgame, which I like. Because you and I used to talk about how there used to be no consequences in the MCU. And now this whole phase 4 is just consequences.
They heard our cries.
Yeah.
And hopefully Multiverse of Madness will explain this a little bit better because I'm still very confused by the multiverse. But I'm also not Peter Parker, so I have a hard time wrapping my brain around it, especially because literally every other way that time and time travel and anything like that and like string theory and everything, like it has to do with the butterfly effect, and the fact that they're kind of working around it is just really kind of confusing. Yeah. But I guess Kevin Feige has a completely different view on the universe and probably has a new iteration of string theory. So at the end of the day, I agree in the sentiment that Peter has in trying to make things better. Like, I understand that it can be a little arrogant, but again, you got to remember that he's like 17 or 18. Like, he's a kid. I don't even make very good decisions, and I'm 24. So, like, you gotta cut him a bit of a break, because everybody's like, I don't feel bad for him at all. And it's like,
really?
That's being a little, there's a huge, like, hate wave, and it's really ironic to...
Wow. I must have missed that wave. I didn't hear anything about that.
I'm also like, I live on social media. I live on the internet.
Yeah, that's true. I am.
And I see it all the time. And I see people who are like, I don't think, I don't feel bad for him at all. He gets everything he deserves. And some people, well, I mean, it's some extremes. And those are the people who are screaming the loudest on that point. Mm-hmm. But there are other people who also are like, I don't feel that bad. Like, there are people in the middle who are like, I don't feel that bad for him because, like, he made these decisions. Like, he chose to make these decisions. But it's like, you also have to understand that he's a kid. And what he was trying to do, in essence, was not something that was supposed to be malicious or vindictive. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is also a testament to the character of Peter Parker throughout history of both, like, comics and games and movies and whatever, is that he kind of has a golden heart. He can just be a little arrogant.
Yeah. But I think naive is maybe at least up until now, naive is a better word.
That's a better word to use. Yeah. So he can be a little naive, but that's also just the human experience.
Mm-hmm. I do think, like, the decision to, like, want to help all of them is, like, definitely a Peter Parker thing to do. But, like, better, it's one of those things, like, it's kind of, like, better said than done, in my personal opinion. But I do, like, the statement of getting what he deserves, I would not agree exactly with that. I think he's just realizing that his actions do have consequences, and sometimes those consequences, I said that incorrectly. Sometimes those consequences result in like your aunt's death, which was like sad, very sad.
Because with great power comes great responsibility.
She actually said the comic accurate, which is, I think she says, with great power, all like it's like there's two
also come.
Yeah, so there's like 2 extra words.
With great responsibility.
So she said the comic accurate version of it, and I was like, my heart, no. That was like, I got hurt. Not gonna like props to this whole scene. That was the most
unexpected twist to the whole movie, to be honest.
I kind of knew a little bit. Like I was like, if she does, like it's gonna happen in this movie. But like at first when she got hit, I was like, she just got like impacted, like she's dead. And then she got like up and was like walking around. It's like, oh, so she's fine. And then she kind of like fell down like a second time, and I was like, this is it. So my emotions were like all over the place.
My eyes.
I know. She's like, I just need to take a breath. I was like, girl, no, it's gonna be your last one. Like, keep moving. What I think is like the most like what adds to the sadness. Sobbing. I know. I was sobbing
Opening
too.
night, like the people behind me just like, and also hats off to Michael Giacchino. I love the score so much. Out of all the Spider-Mans, this is the best score, and I have been listening to it nonstop. But when that it's kind of just like a tragedy theme, because they'll play throughout the rest of the film. That whole motif starts to play, and she's gone, and Tom Holland's performance is just so amazing and so raw and so emotional, and that's one of the scenes that I say like he deserves more credit, because it's really hard to perform a scene like that and like have your audience viscerally feel it the same way. But people just went, they're just sobbing.
Yeah, I think for audience reactions, this was like, I would say as big as like Endgame reactions.
It was big.
It was pretty big.
It was pretty big.
I think what made the death more sad, there's 2 things. One is that like you can tell like because Peter was like, leave, Aunt May, like leave, like go away, but she chose to stay and like try and protect like her nephew, you know, because she's obviously been this parental figure for however many years. This Peter Parker's parents have been dead. And then also what makes it more sad is that like Peter doesn't even have time to like stay there and like grieve, because he literally gets shot.
He's a vigilante.
Yeah, and so he has to leave, and I'm like that was like heartbreaking for me. Like he could not stay, he had to go.
What's extra sad is he probably wasn't even at her funeral. Either that or he kind of watched from the top of a building,
or like from the very back of like the crowd. I'm assuming she got buried after everyone forgot who Peter Parker was.
Probably.
So I feel like to not draw a suspicion of like who's this random kid at this person's funeral, he probably like stayed in the back, which is still sad because he should have been like there.
Yeah. Well, because most funerals, although she did run like a whole shelter, but I was gonna say most funerals aren't an open invitation kind of a thing where it's just like, oh, just come if you want, BYOB. Like they're very private, very sacred things for most people.
What I think I also liked about this movie is that how it kind of creates the ultimate Peter Parker, because in a way, like Peter Parker got all this knowledge and like, you know, learned valuable lessons, I think, from Andrew's Peter and Toby's Peter, but he's also kind of lost, and I've said this to you in private, but like collectively I think he's lost like what all the Spider-Mans have lost. He's lost his parents, lost his Uncle Ben, lost Aunt May now. So like he has no parental figure. Lost Tony Stark. Doctor Strange doesn't remember him. Like no Avenger remembers him.
He's lost more than anybody could actually possibly lose.
Yeah, MJ's not dead, but technically he's lost her because she doesn't remember him. So they're not like together anymore. His best friend doesn't remember him. Like he's literally on his own, which I'm very interested to see that storyline in the future. It's
sad, but it's also exciting, considering like this Peter especially is a very perseverant character, so I'm more excited, I think, than upset or angry or whatever, because he's basically starting fresh, and he's gonna figure stuff out. Something may or may not be redone, or something may or may not be undone, but he's gonna figure it out. And I'm really excited to see how he figures it out for himself, actually for himself.
You're
this
right.
time.
Yeah, because now he has no Stark tech. Like, he literally made his suit with, like, a sewing machine and, like, fabric.
Because none of the Stark tech is going to recognize him.
Yeah. Also, because Pepper is still alive, and she heads Stark. She's the CEO of Stark. She's not going to remember him.
I'm also interested, though, because everybody seems to remember Spider-Man. So they know who Spider-Man is as his own, like... They know Spider-Man as the superhero. They just don't know who Peter Parker is. And for a lot of people, it's going to be really confusing. But that's why I'm excited, because it's not completely starting over from square one. Or you're not getting negative points.
Yeah, like, you're not like, hey, world, I'm Spidey. Like, this is Spider-Man over here.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah, so, like, it makes you think that you're starting on negative ground, but there's actually... You still have a couple pointers. So, I'm curious to see where that goes.
I did see something where it's like the fact that, like, Peter Parker has been cut out, like no one remembers Peter Parker is actually not that big of like a disruption to the people around him, because especially in the movie Homecoming, he has literally, like, did not go to prom. Like, obviously he was out trying to fight, like, the Vulture, like, so, and like you actually kind of see that, like, if you look really close in the background. Especially, like, in MJ's room, there's, like, photographs, like, of her time at high school. I think, except for, like, one, so, like prom events or, like, other, like, the debate team. He wasn't there for the debate team. So, like,
The academic decathlon.
Yeah, that was the debate team, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, all those, like, big group events, like, Peter Parker himself is actually in, like, none of those photos. Because he's always missed it.
That's really interesting. So it doesn't...
So, like...
People aren't like, who's this random kid?
Yeah, so in photographs, people don't have to be like, who's this?
Except maybe in the yearbook, but, like, who really cares?
Yeah.
There are so, like...
It's like, oh, I never saw him. I never
With peace and
talked to him.
with peace and love, there's so many people in all of my yearbooks, and I'm just like, I've never seen you a day in my life.
Yeah, which also makes, like, I think adds to, like... It's, like, a bittersweet. Like, I view the ending as, like, bittersweet. So, like, I think that adds to the bitterness of it. And when I first saw the movie, I was like, I love this ending, but I also hate this ending because it's so sad. But, like, I think I do like the ending now. Oh yeah, I think I do like the ending.
I'm excited. I'm optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I just remember something that I noticed that you didn't until I told you is that even after MJ forgets who Peter Parker is, she's still wearing that, like, broken Dahlia necklace that Peter gave her in Far From Home. So something in the back of her mind... Are you wiping your eyes? So something in the back of her mind is... She always... Like, there's this pull to this necklace, and it's probably subconscious. She doesn't know why. But she still wears it.
And she still has chemistry with him. But, like, with their interaction, she's still, like, all flustered, which is something that, for this version of MJ, for Michelle Jones, it's not a normal thing.
Yeah.
So when you have someone like Peter to just kind of show up out of the blue, and she's all just like, oh.
Do you know what I am kind of like? I think it's just kind of, like, funny. So Peter's new apartment is, like, a couple blocks, not even, from Rockefeller Center. That has to be a very expensive apartment.
Probably.
I feel like. And Spider-Man is broke. So how does he pay for this?
Plot hole.
Oh, also, going quickly back to Hawkeye, episode 6. That's actually another night Peter is swinging than the finale takes place in, because the tree is still upright. It falls in Hawkeye.
I figured.
And in Hawkeye, it doesn't snow until, like, the last couple minutes. And then when he's swinging through New York, there's, like, a lot of snow on the ground. But I would love a team up with Kate Bishop and Peter Parker. I really would. I would love to see that.
Well, speaking of Hawkeye, the introduction, or reintroduction, I should say, of Wilson Fisk into the MCU. Because I know in the comics and in the game especially, there's a big thing with Spider-Man and Hell's Kitchen and the growing footprint of Wilson Fisk. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of excited to see that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man actually being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and not intergalactic warrior of
of Stark.
Intergalactic warrior of the Infinity Stones.
Yeah, I am glad that we've gotten back to like friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, because I think that's why a lot of people love the character Spider-Man. I mean, but even before the MCU, like Spider-Man was my favorite superhero, and now he's still like top 3. Oh yeah,
There's
he like
just
kind of
so much
redeemed
about
himself
that.
a little bit.
Yeah. Well, they kind of redeemed themselves, like and that's how I think having all the Peters worked.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just to kind of segue. I was really worried that the way they were going to do this was going to be really cheap and it wasn't going to bode well. And I know that, like I said, this film is more of a love letter to fans of the Spider-Man cinematic web, but like it worked.
Mm-hmm.
It worked really well, and I think it did a lot of justice for all characters. They kind of didn't just show up and do their thing and peace out. Like, they had an impact on this Peter,
Mm-hmm.
but they also had an impact for themselves. So he had a redemption of himself. He saved a life. Peter, too, kind of had a little bit of retribution for actually being able to cure...
The Green Goblin.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's something he even said, like, he's like, yeah, I've been thinking about it for years. It's like, it was obviously been, like, eating at him that he couldn't do that. Or, like, that, like, the way that the Green Goblin went out was that, like, he died, basically.
And it also had to do with, it contributed to Harry Osborn, you know, turning against him and putting on the suit and kind of going down the same path, but just blindly. There's a lot of good closure in this film for all the characters across all the, I want to say all the trilogies, but unfortunately.
Well, I think there's actually, I don't know if this is like rumor, but there is a talk that like they're thinking of Andrew Garfield's like third Spider-Man movie, which if it's like his darkness, like his dark side, I actually like would not be opposed to that. Just seeing dark Peter Parker, which we did kind of get a little bit of. Like, there was a little bit more darkness, and which I think actually happens more like as you get older and you experience more emotions, you get frustrated more easily because life is hard. But I did like seeing that. It was actually because I know people like Tom was like, you're gonna see like a different side to Peter that you haven't seen before, and I'm like, really? What is that? But then like I noticed it right when he's like beating up the Green Goblin like in the apartment building. That's when I first noticed it, and I was very shocked, but I was like, I'm kind of here for it.
And it was before he had even actually done anything super
bad,
super malicious.
But what I think it was also was that like, obviously, I think out of the 3 Spider-Mans, and the MCU, Peter Parker has the most sensitive spider sense. I think, like it's more tuned to like his surroundings. I think so. I believe, obviously, this has not been confirmed or anything, but I believe he could sense that Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, did want to like hurt his aunt. So I think like that's also a reason why he
kind of thought that
more
was implied.
Vicious. Okay.
Like watching it the second time, like knowing what was going to happen, that was something that I kind of noticed. I'm like, oh yeah, actually that makes sense. So I kind of thought it was implied. But...
Okay, good. So that means I'm not pulling at air. So going back though to the 3 Peters, I remember when they were first talking about like, because everyone has like their theories. I actually was kind of hoping that they would not be in it, but I am very happy with how they didn't like overtake the movie, which I'm glad.
They didn't overtake it, but they contributed to it like in a more impactful way than I was afraid that they weren't going to, but they did.
And they came a little bit towards like the end of the movie too.
Yeah. So it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, they came when like Tom's Peter needed them, because they came at his most vulnerable point. Like his Aunt May just died, and he's like having all these thoughts, these dark thoughts and sad ones. Oh, Ned's powers.
Oh, yeah.
Totally forgot.
I am afraid because they most definitely set him up to be the Hobgoblin, and I don't want him to be the Hobgoblin.
I know they even gave him the line like, I promise I won't hurt you.
If there are any cheap lines in this movie, it's that one. I'm like, come on.
This may be wrong, Ned. I think, but also because we're in Ned's house for like a couple minutes of the movie, and on the wall is a bunch of these like knives, basically these very like intricate looking knives. And my friend told me that she thinks that those ones resemble a character in the comics called like Elektra, who is a woman, obviously. So we were thinking about like Ned's mom. Well, we see the grandma, but he talks to about his parents like, are obviously alive and like are there somewhere. So, but I don't know how accurate that is. That could be a misinterpretation because I don't know a lot about the comics, to be totally honest. I would like to know more, but there's just so many comics. It's kind of difficult. But like I think like that weapon in particular, the one with like the two like prongs on the end of it, I think is like one that the character Elektra like uses. So I don't know, that would be really interesting. But does the Hobgoblin use magic? Because like they definitely set up Ned to be like a sorcerer of some kind.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean in the comics like Ned Leeds, like the
Is
character
the
Ned Leeds is
Hobgoblin.
the Hobgoblin. So yeah, that'd be very interesting. Okay, overall I rate this movie
10 out of 10.
Okay, I rated it a 9 out of 10. Just because I do have a little bit of differences between you and I.
I'm kidding. It's like a 9.2.
A 9.2.
Which most movies do not get that high of a rating. But the score was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The performances were amazing. And the story was really
Very
pretty
good.
good.
Yeah. I'm just happy that I think it completes the trilogy very well. Like that's
That's
probably,
how you complete a trilogy.
Yeah. Star Wars.
Lucasfilm.
But I think that's what I'm overall the most happy with, is that the way it completed the trilogy is phenomenal and almost perfect, I'd have to say.
It still gives us a lot to look forward to.
It does. And it did not make the characterizations of the character whack, because there are certain characters in the MCU that just like took a 180 and we don't know how that happened. Well, guys, that has been our discussion for Spider-Man No Way Home. Be sure to leave a like on the video, comment. What did you think about this movie? What do you think is going to be in the future of this MCU's Peter Parker? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you know when I upload future discussion videos. Well, guys, that's all I got for you today. Connor, thank you for joining me. And until next time.